Hey everyone, it's Mark Ferguson with Investor More, and welcome to another one of our real estate investing videos. Today we're talking about a topic that has been very controversial and coming up a lot with me, and that is rising housing prices, a possible housing crash. And I want to talk about what is actually causing housing prices to go up. I hear it all the time that it's landlords, institutional investors, cheap money, too much demand, and that's why prices keep going up. But I have a different theory. I think all of that can contribute to keeping the market, stable and keeping demand there. But that's not why prices go up. The reason prices go up is because the cost to produce a house is going up, right? If there's enough people to buy houses and ample supply, the market and competition will drive prices down to where there's a small enough profit for people to be happy. But just because there's a ton of demand doesn't mean it's going to automatically make crazy prices with crazy profits, because all kinds of new builders and companies will come in to take advantage of those profits. The real reason prices are skyrocketing and going higher is because the cost to build is skyrocketing and going higher, just like almost any other business out there, right? The cost of food isn't skyrocketing because there's a ton more demand for food, it's because the cost to produce the food is going up, right? A lot of people are saying that landlords are evil and landlords are causing the housing crash because they're buying houses to rent and not selling them to owner-occupied buyers or letting other people sell them to owner-occupied buyers. That's kind of like blaming car rental places for driving the price up of cars, because car rental places are buying cars and renting them out to people and not allowing other people to buy those cars. But the fact is, the reason cars are expensive and their prices are going up is because the cost to build those cars is going up. And there was a ton of profit and a ton of room to make money on those cars. They build way, way, way more cars. There's much more competition. Now, we have seen some short-term jumps in car prices because of chip shortages and the ability not to build cars. Well, there you go, right? It's not massive demand that's pushing car prices up. It's a problem with being able to build them, to supply them, to create them, that is pushing prices up. So for some, cars that are already out there, already built, already available, their prices are going up because the cost to build new cars is going up, or you simply just can't build them because of supply chain issues. And it's the same way with houses. So we're gonna talk about lots of really interesting things. I'm gonna show you some graphs on new construction, on fun cities like Detroit, and show you some things about population change and crashes and things there. We'll talk about some material costs and go into this really in depth. So we love seeing likes, comments, shares. We love seeing new subscribers. Keep those up. Have tons more information on actually investing in real estate, which is what we mostly talk about and do here on investormore.com, and lots of books on Amazon as well if you really want to learn how to do more of that. All right, before we get into some of these fun charts and different things I want to show you, a lot of you might be wondering why I'm talking about landlords being evil and things like that. There's a growing movement of people who just hate landlords, hate house flippers, think they are evil, the cause of everybody's problems, and it's kind of crazy. It's like, how do you guys understand how economics work? Do you understand how the world works, how supply and demand works? But there's this push that there should be no landlords. Everybody should be a house owner, which has so many problems, right? Some people just don't want to be house owners for one thing. Some people want to rent. I don't see how forcing people to own houses is going to fix these problems, especially when, as we talk about here later on, the real problem is the cost to build, not landlords. And so a lot of people even go so far as they want the government to own every house should be free, all of that. So that's one reason why I made this video, is to just kind of address that situation and concern that landlords don't control the market, right? Landlords can buy rental properties, which might take some properties off the market for homeowners, but it also creates rental properties for people who want to be renters. So there has to be this supply and demand balance between renters and homeowners. Not everybody can be a homeowner. Not everybody wants to be a renter. There has to be some balance there. And landlords will work with the market, right? If there's a shortage of rental properties in an area, rent prices go up, landlords will probably move in, buy more properties, turn them into rentals, and if they buy enough rentals and stabilize the market, rent prices will stabilize, it'll have kind of equilibrium. But at the same time, if the market's so short of houses that by them buying houses makes prices shoot up, well, then that's a problem with the supply, right? There's not enough houses for everybody in that area. If landlords buying too many houses causes prices to skyrocket, that means there's not enough houses. There needs to be more houses built. How do we know how much houses will cost? It's based on how much it costs to build them in those situations. And the same thing for house flippers. Like, people blame house flippers for causing prices to go up because they're buying houses that owner-occupants couldn't have bought. Again, I think we've bought 25, 30 houses in the last 2 years, and maybe 1 or 2 of them could have been bought by an owner-occupant. They needed too much work, right? Owner-occupants can't get loans on houses that need a ton of work. The sellers want to sell them really fast, sometimes in as short as 3 days, right? Sometimes it's wholesalers selling them who would not allow an inspection, appraisal, any kind of loan to be done. And sometimes they're just really, really ugly, horrible houses that people don't want. So we came in and bought them months after they've been for sale. So house flippers, again, actually help the housing market. We take houses that owner-occupants can't buy, we fix them up and put them back into the market where they can buy them. So house flippers in general can often increase supply and help that problem as well. So the problem is not with rental property owners, house flippers, investors. The problem is there aren't enough houses. And when there aren't enough houses, what determines price is how much it costs to build those houses. All right, now the first thing we're going to look at, which you should see on my screen right now, is the history of new construction in the United States. Now you can see, dating back to 1960, kind of a pretty, a little bit of up and down, but pretty kind of flat curve about how much building there's going on. There's not a ton more happening. And then we saw a steady drop. This is when interest rates were 10%, if you can believe that. That was, crazy. And then from 1990 to 2005, 6, a steady increase of building that never dropped. You go back here before, and there's a big increase with a big drop, increase with a drop. We never really saw that steady 20-year stretch, almost 15-year stretch of building like we did in the early 2000s, 90s. And what happened was eventually they built, and lenders were giving people horrible loans. I mean, no income needed, no credit needed, no down payments for investment properties, 120% loan to value on owner-occupied properties, just insane stuff. And the owner occupancy rate skyrocketed during this time because so many people who really shouldn't have been getting houses were getting houses and loans. And then we saw what happened. The bottom dropped out. Everyone realized what was happening. People started losing homes to foreclosure, and they built too many houses. There were too many houses. Boom, building completely stopped almost in the country, and it caused just, a foreclosure crisis because there are too many houses for the people who are out there. Too many foreclosures, too many new construction houses, and that caused the market to just crash like we saw. But it wasn't, this is kind of the one case where you can see cost to build does not affect the price of homes, because if there's too much supply, right, if you have too many cars and you can't sell them, you got to slash prices to get them off the lot, to get them off the books, to sell them. The cost to build doesn't matter. You've already built these cars, you already have them. You have to just liquidate them. And that's what happened with houses. There were too many houses, too much inventory, not enough people to buy them, and prices just kept getting slashed and slashed and slashed to be able to sell them. And it was banks that held a lot of this inventory and home builders who held some of this inventory that were empty houses, right? They weren't collecting rent, they weren't collecting income, they had nothing coming in on them, so they wanted to get rid of them, they wanted to sell them because it's just costing them money to have these houses. And what you saw was a crash. And since then, we had record low building for many years, and then we're just now kind of getting back to normal almost of what building should be. But we've had a decade of below normal building, and that's why there aren't enough houses. That's why you keep hearing over and over again, there's not enough inventory, there's not enough houses. And if there aren't enough houses, the number one determination of what prices will be is how much it costs to make a house, to build a house. And we're not just talking about how much lumber costs, but we're talking about how much land costs, building permits, how easy the building permit fee is, creating subdivisions, labor costs, material costs, time it takes to get your permits approved. All of that comes into play when building a house. And the longer it takes to build houses, the harder it is to build houses, the more expensive it costs to build houses. Obviously, the more that house has to be, the higher that house has to be priced in order for builders to build and make money. And that's what we're seeing with house prices now. Cost to build just keeps going up and up and up and up and up, and there's still demand, right? If there were no real estate investors, we would probably still have enough demand for the houses that are out there right now. Prices would probably be just about what they are right now, maybe a tiny bit lower, but they might be the same because there's a lot of demand and just not enough houses. Now, in order to really see a drop in prices in houses, we'd have to see the cost to build drop significantly so more people could build houses, more houses could be built, or we'd have to see a glut of inventory and way too many houses being built to the point where the cost to build doesn't matter. It's just there's all these houses available out there already, and we just don't have that either. Okay, something else that we hear a lot is that there's way more houses in the US right now than there are people who need houses. There's all these vacant houses. You could house all the homeless. Everybody could have a house. It'd be fine. And technically, that's true. You could house all the homeless with the vacant houses there are. But there's a reason they're vacant. They're not just sitting there with a landlord hoping it goes up in price and he doesn't want to rent it, right? I'm a landlord. I own properties. I don't want them vacant. I want them rented. I either want to sell them or I want to rent them to make money. I don't let them just sit there vacant for an extended period of time. Maybe I might let it sit there vacant for a month or two because I'm repairing it or fixing it up or waiting for a 1031 exchange, but not for a long, long period of time. There aren't all these houses just sitting vacant because landlords are greedy and want to raise prices. So what we can see here on this chart is a history of vacant housing units in the United States. And you might hear the term, oh, there's 17 million vacant houses in the United States or 15 million vacant houses in the United States. That's true. Right now, there are about 15 million vacant housing units in the United States. However, in 2010, there was 19 million, right? There was a lot more. And so we had 14 million in 2000, but you got to remember there were less people, less houses back then. So we don't have that many vacant houses compared to historic vacant house numbers. There's always going to be a certain amount of vacant houses, right? There's going to be people who are selling their house, they're moving out, that's included in this number, so they're vacant for a while. There's going to be people repairing houses like house flippers like me, rental property owners like me who are repairing them before we rent them. There's going to be people who have second houses, vacation houses. Those are usually very expensive places. Those make up a large chunk of the vacant properties that are available. There's going to be some Airbnb, short-term rental properties that are vacant, sometimes occupied, sometimes that are counted in this. And then there are going to be some dilapidated, rundown houses that have just been vacant for a very long time and are just sitting there. And I don't think anybody is looking to live in those. And real estate investors are actually ones who help bring those back into the market by repairing them, turning them into rentals, or selling them as house flips. So this idea that there's all these vacant homes just sitting here waiting to be bought or rented out isn't really what's happening, right? There's just always vacant houses because there's transitional periods. There's people with some vacation homes. But again, I don't think, that vacation house on the beach is going to work very well as a homeless shelter. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but there's lots of different reasons for why there's vacant houses. They're not just sitting there empty just to be empty. They need work. They're in really bad shape. They're in a transition period. They're a short-term rental, or they are used, just not used all the time. So there's still not enough houses. That's really what we're looking at. And you can see the number of vacant houses decreasing as well, which would also indicate that, hey, some of those vacant houses are being turned into long-term living units, and we still don't have enough properties for everybody. Okay, now we're gonna look at some fun stuff, or at least I think it's fun, and that's Detroit. So I'm on a website called biggestuscities.com that shows the population history of Detroit. So why are we talking about this? Why are we showing Detroit? Well, Detroit kind of shows us what happens when populations decrease, when there's too many houses, and we're gonna show you what happens when population decreases. But at the same time, you have to remember Detroit is a crazy worst case scenario of what happens. In a lot of other channels, some other people are saying, oh, migration is important, population is going to be decreasing. When population decreases, all these housing prices are going to crash and drop. Well, let's take a look at what happened in Detroit and see if that's really true or not. So what you can see is starting back in 1850, there's almost no one in Detroit. Huge population boom when, the industrial revolution for car assembly lines came about, skyrocketing population. It hit a peak of 1.8 million or so around 1950, and then it started dropping. Detroit has lost more than half its population the last 50 years. So that's why Detroit has such cheap houses. People say, oh, look at Detroit, you can buy $10,000 houses. They're tearing down houses. They don't have it. You can't even find people to buy a house. It's horrible there. It's because they lost half their population, more than half of it. And then during the housing crash, we saw all the craziness going on with auto manufacturers getting bailouts, laying off people, moving factories around. Let's see here. From 2009 to 2010, Detroit lost 200,000 people. They went from 910,000 to 713,000 people, lost over 20% of their population. That can cause a housing crash, right? If your area loses 20% of their population, yes, by all means, that can cause a housing crash. That can cause there to be too much supply of houses, too many houses for people there. And at that point, the cost to build does not matter, right? That's the kind of scenario where cost to build does not matter. The last major housing crash, crazy population drops like this. But this is really interesting because this might surprise you. Okay, now I'm showing you a really interesting graph, and that is the house price index for Detroit. Now what you'll see, there's been some steady growth, even with the population decreasing in Detroit for many, 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 many years. And then we saw the housing crash, and it crashed just like most places did, right about the same time. And then you had that huge population decrease, and prices dropped, but it didn't get crazy bad. It wasn't really that much worse than other cities. And then what's even crazier is the population kept going down. Like, it's still decreasing in Detroit. And look at prices. They keep going up. So this whole idea that when populations decrease, when migration decreases, that prices go down isn't really true, or the data doesn't back it up. There's even at least 10 other countries that have decreasing population right now in the rest of the world. Some of them 1% to 2% decrease, which is about the max that you will see. Nothing like the 20% decrease Detroit saw in 1 year. Their prices are still going up, right? Their prices aren't going down. Even in Detroit, which had one of the most remarkable population decreases in the history of the world, didn't see that much bigger of a crash than the rest of the country, and its prices are still going up now. And so it's just important to realize that housing prices are mostly dependent on the cost to build. People want nice places to live. They want nice houses to live in. A lot of people don't want to live in downtown Detroit, where the houses are old and dilapidated and not maintained very well, or not in the area they want to be in. People are constantly going to where the communities have more money spent on them, parks, nice streets, nice houses, newer houses, and that's what drives the cost of houses, is pretty much what new houses cost to build. Now, older houses, they might be more or less, depending on if they're more attractive or less attractive than those new houses. But if you cannot build new houses at an affordable price, and there's sufficient demand in an area, right? There aren't just millions of houses sitting around. Even if there are, like there were in Detroit, you can still see prices will go up based on what that cost to build is. People kind of follow new construction and new houses. And I know so many people who will only live in a new house. Like, unless there's like 0 new houses available, they're going to buy a new house. They don't want to live in a house that someone else lived in. They want it to be brand new, even if it costs them more money. So this idea that housing prices are based on demand is true only in the case where supply is so high and outrageous that they have to slash prices to get rid of inventory. But if supply and demand are at all balanced, or demand outpaces supply, almost all the cost of housing is based on the cost to build, the cost to produce that good, just like anything else. Just like cars, televisions go down in price, not because demand has decreased significantly, because their cost to build has decreased, because technology has improved. The same with computers. Most things go up over time because labor increases, materials increase, except for some technology goes down because we figure out how to do it better. But food keeps going up. It's not because there's so many more people wanting to buy food, it's because the cost of food is going up. And that's why those prices keep going up. So yes, you could blame investors. You can blame me. You can blame institutional investors, which again, I think have bought a total of 300,000 homes out of 85 million, a teensy tiny little slice. You can blame house flippers. But really, the reason that housing prices are going up is because demand is sufficient. Demand is really high, actually. And supply is being used up. So whatever it costs to build houses, that's what they're going to cost. So if you want houses to decrease in price, somehow you got to figure out to decrease the cost of those houses. You know, you're either decreasing land costs, you're decreasing government regulations and government fees, which I know the government doesn't want to do and won't admit that's part of it, but that's a big part of it. You're decreasing labor. Nobody wants to be paid less. You're decreasing materials. I don't see that happening very, soon, if at all. So pretty much we are stuck with house prices going up as the cost to build goes up, unless there's some crazy situation where too many houses are built, which I don't see happening, or the population decreases by 20%, which I don't see happening, or something else crazy happens with the entire economy is destroyed, in which case we have a lot bigger problems than housing prices in the housing market, and we probably would have wished housing prices would have just kept going up like they were. Okay, so something we're gonna look at real quick. Why is the cost to build increasing? Well, there's so many different reasons. Right now we're looking at lumber prices across the board, and they stayed pretty steady for a few years, and then hopped up with coronavirus, dropped down, hopped back up again to big time, and then dropped back down, and pretty close to normal now from everything I've read. Now, is that why we saw this massive jump in housing? Because of lumber prices went up? A little bit, that caused some of it, but you have to remember, it's not just lumber that goes into the cost to build a house. It's concrete, it's fixtures, it's paint, it's sheetrock, HVAC, electrical. All of that has been going up. And it's not just from the pandemic and COVID and printing money. They were all going up before that too. And that's just how the economy works. Prices of things go up over time. That's what happens. And even before COVID, land was going up, and that's a huge cost. The permitting process, the subdivision process, the building process gets more complicated. There's more environmental fees, there's more restrictions on building. All of that increases costs as well. Water costs are extremely high in some areas. In Colorado, it takes $80,000 to hook up to water for a new house in many areas. And people think that's crazy. Well, we're at the top of the mountain, right? I have my river house. That little river by my house is like the main source of water for my area in northern Colorado. It's not a big river if you've seen that video. Shares of that river are $63,000 just for one share. And that doesn't count the infrastructure to put pipes in place, to tap into the pipes that are there, the fees for all of that, or the construction. That's just for a share of that river. And it's just going up. So those costs were going up before COVID, before all of this. And they went up even higher with COVID coming into play. And maybe some of those will decrease a little bit when things get back to normal, but it's not going to decrease by very much. And just remember, prices for everything keep going up. Labor keeps going up. I don't think labor is going to drop down any. Materials, lumber went crazy for a while, but what happened when lumber went crazy was builders stopped building even more. They stopped buying lumber because they couldn't make any money at those costs. And then we saw prices drop back down again. And I just don't see how the cost to build is going to get cheaper except for a very, very tiny margin. And that's one of the biggest factors of what housing prices will do. And if cost to build doesn't go down, housing prices aren't going to go down either. All right, so if you're hoping for housing prices to drop or crash, you may have to hope for a very, very long time. In my opinion, housing prices are directly related to cost to build. And that's land costs, permitting costs, labor costs, material costs, ease of building subdivisions, lot availability. There's so many things that go into it, and all of it's getting more complicated and more expensive. And there simply aren't enough houses for everybody out there. And NAR, the National Association of Realtors, estimates there's 5 million houses short of what current demand is. Now, I know some people said, oh, well, NAR's biased, they're making up numbers, but I've never actually seen someone dispute those numbers. They've said they're biased, but they've never shown what the numbers are or why they're wrong. And so in my experience as being an agent, seeing building going up and down in my market, it sure seems that way to me. There's not enough houses for everybody out there who wants to buy those houses. There isn't some secret stash of houses just sitting around being hoarded by super greedy, evil landlords. And even if there were, we still are basing our price of houses on the cost to build, just like almost any other industry does as well. If there's sufficient demand, you're going to pay how much it costs to build plus a profit margin, which is the amount equal to whatever works for companies to take the risk to do the work to produce those products. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. I love seeing your comments, suggestions, telling me why I'm wrong or right, or we can have some discussions down below. That's fine with me. And as I said before, make sure you check out investormore.com for much more information on flips, rentals, being an agent, all that great stuff. And we have 9 books on Amazon, a 10th one coming out soon, my crazy real estate stories. It's in editing right now, so hopefully that'll be ready eventually. And like I said, leave some comments. Let's hear what you think. And we'll have many more videos on my actual properties, rentals, flips, multifamily, all that coming up here soon, as well as some other advice videos too.